Thank you.
Matt, you talked about this team having to make some sacrifices and things like that. It looks on paper like one of your deeper teams. Can you speak to the challenge of kind of figuring out roles and figuring out combinations and getting everybody enough minutes to get in the rhythm, as you talk about often?
Right. Well, I think, a lot of it is going to happen organically. It's not where you're going to make a decision yourself until you get to the end, and then you have to make a decision.
Right.
And so you just want as much data as you can. It probably leads into not having your 5 best players be your starters, but the guys that mesh well together, like who all plays together. It's almost like having a second unit too, and kind of looking at it that way, where you can play a couple different ways and do some different things. But across the board, we have good players,
right?
And just trying your best to figure out what works the best. I really don't have the correct answer today, but whatever that might be, I think it's going to be a good one. It might not be we're going to try to do the best one, but there's no doubt what we decide will still be pretty good.
Does the transfer era change the way you approach your roster, the way you allocate minutes, the way you use red shirts, anything like that?
Not really. I'll still utilize red shirts when it's there and really discuss that with guys, because you're making the best decision for them more times than not. We live in a basketball kind of landscape that's got a little microwave to it, to where everything, if it's not right away, then it's wrong. That's not the case. Like, you got to be able to develop. Like it's hard for a freshman to be good.
Right.
Like, everybody would agree to that, but yet when he doesn't get exactly what he wants, you're going to see more people leaving. That's why when I was a part of that committee, that we wanted a guardrail to that, saying they can't just use their one-time transfer after their freshman year, because everybody's going to transfer. Like, who's happy after their freshman year? But if you have the right people around you that can convince you to stay somewhere and fight through your adversity, that's when you're going to grow. You're going to grow through that. So when we kind of look at where we are with the transfer portal, the one-time transfer, the red shirting, I think it makes even more sense to just keep making quality decisions to help those guys. And it's doing your homework. A lot of people put the emphasis on recruiting, where I put the emphasis on evaluating.
Mm-hmm.
And they evaluate too, but it's such an intelligent concept, a red shirt. But probably only intelligent people are going to grasp it. A lot of people don't grasp it. Like, well, I don't want a red shirt. Like, well, you don't want to get better? Like, if you're not good enough, you don't want to improve? Like, it just depends on where you are, and it's so hard to project when you're 16 or 17 where you're going to be when you're 19. Where do you see me? I don't know. I haven't watched you practice with our team and compete.
Right.
And so when that comes there, that's why I always talk about how I'm going to use people. I'll use you if you're one of our top 2, 3, 4 players, but I'm not running plays for my 8th man.
What do you need from your seniors this year in terms of leadership, being that they've experienced a lot of things most of your team hasn't?
I think the leadership comes in when adversity sets in more than anything. I think that's going to be the telltale, especially if some of the things that you talk about in terms of you can't keep everybody happy, there's not enough minutes to go around. When that falls next to their feet, where that's maybe they don't get as many minutes in a particular game, now they got to show that leadership then, and helping other people, but also cheering on the person who's playing in front of them. And I thought Travion did a great job last year, because Zach finished a couple games and Travion was his biggest cheerleader. I know with Aaron Wheeler and Mason Gillis, same thing. Those guys are always cheering each other on, and that just makes for great chemistry. You have to be able to kind of swallow your pride at times and understand it's a team game, and those guys did a great job of that last year, so I would expect they would do a great job again this year.
You talked at the first practice last week about how some of the 2 big lineups that you're having, it hasn't gone particularly well yet.
Right.
It's only been a week since then. Have you seen any improvement?
Yeah, we've done it since then in those 5 practices twice. So then it's a little bit better. There's just areas they're really good at. Then there's areas that we really struggle. And so, like, when we turn it over with that big lineup, it's hard. But if it's a rebounding drill or just rebounding period, we normally get it. And so those kind of pieces of running stuff that's more beneficial for that bigger lineup, and there's not as much room to play for guards. But it takes time. And the problem in coaching is, do you have enough time to work on playing a lot of different ways? It's just difficult because you want to put in the time, what you're going to do. You don't want to put in a bunch of time to something that you're going to do 10 to 15% of the time. You want to give that 10 to 15% of the time, So, but no, it's. I really believe we're going to be able to do it when we can versus the other team. I think it's going to be more important about who we're playing instead of just saying, hey, this is how we're going to play no matter what. I don't think that's going to happen.
Matt, do you think that going through the COVID season makes you a stronger team going forward in terms of how you've been able to cope with different things?
Well, I think you ask young people to make a lot of sacrifices to be able to play a season, and they're able to do that. And so I think when you get into seasons, you're going to have some discipline, some sacrifice, guys playing roles. And now, what they had to do in the pandemic, that's definitely harder than anything they got to do in a regular season. So that sacrifice for a 20-year-old, I think, really shows that they have it in them to sacrifice in other areas too. But once again, when it's the same for everybody. Sometimes it helps you, but doesn't give you an advantage. I don't know if it gives you an advantage.
How much can one tough day in March drive you and drive them through the off season and to the next season?
Right.
How much is that still there in your mind?
Well, it's always there as a coach. Like, you remember the losses more than you remember the wins, and that's terrible because you don't you should cherish quality wins more than a tough loss. Just when you win games by one possession, you look at it like you just won the game, like you had it the whole way. When in reality, you won it by one possession. But when you lose them, it's like you got your doors blown off. And in reality, once again, it's one possession. They're not that much better than you, but that's the fine line between winning and losing. That's what separates. And we had a lot of those games in Big Ten play that we won last year. But when it got to the end of the Big Ten tournament, we got down 20 in a game, came storming back, sent it to overtime, and then weren't very good in that overtime. But we were great in that second half. We had to come back in the second half once again from them. Trying to get that consistency, I think, is important to where we were a much better second half team than we were a first half team.
You have had several NCAA tournament really tough losses at the end. Do you get the feeling sometimes that fate or karma or something owes you a good bounce or two because you've had so many games that have come down to that?
Yeah, it's the basketball gods, and I can go through different games in the NCAA tournament that has went our way. Whether we beat Washington to go to the Sweet 16, we beat Northern Iowa in the same tournament to be able to play Washington. So there's a lot of games. Texas A&M, we won at the end of the overtime game. So I could keep going with the close ones, but people don't remember those. They always remember the other ones. And I'm a believer in the basketball gods, is what I'm a believer in. I'm a believer you play the game the right way, you carry yourself the right way, and when things maybe go against you, you got some positive things coming your way. I believe that, but you gotta help yourself. Your hard work's got to help you. It's got to help you.
We talked a lot about Travion and Zach Montgomery, those two adjusting. How was the other team? How's the other players adjust those two on the floor?
Yeah.
And how's that process going?
Yeah. Well, I just talked about it. We've played since we've talked last. We've played a couple days in practice with them. It's okay. It's hard to do, to be frank with you, offensively. From turnovers to spacing, it's a little bit harder. It's really cool in a rebounding drill, though. You get all your rebound, you get all the rebounds. So I think we had like a 5-minute rebound war that way, and it was like a 38-11, just a debacle. But then we go to live play, we turn the ball over. You got the two biggest guys on your team, around the rim, and now they got to sprint and they got to try to catch up to something they're playing behind. And that's the one thing with size. If you get behind plays, you don't always catch up. And it's okay. I don't look at it as something that's a mainstay for us. I look at it more as if you have a 4 that's a non-shooter, that helps that matchup for us. We just have to get it figured out if that guy's a shooter. Does that make sense for us to do? Because I really believe we would have an advantage offensively. But the whole thing is it's got to be relative to your personnel. So like the other guys that we have, they're good players too. And so I don't want to take their values away. Caleb First is a good player. Trey Kaufman's a good player. Mason Gillis is a good player. Obviously Zach and Travion are quality players. So like, you just gotta kind of put that into play and make sure everybody understands that.
When you guys do go 5-on-5 with those two together, who are the unfortunate souls that have to guard them next year?
That's Caleb and Trey.
So freshmen are dealing with those two guys. How's that working out for them?
It's about even if you want the truth. Yeah. Because they don't complement each other great. They just don't. They don't complement each other. But Trey and Caleb complement each other. So, but if we flip it and Zach has to play with Caleb, and then Travion has to play with Trey, you can keep that straight. They complement each other. So you have a more. So you're not just watching and saying, "Is this good?" You're watching and saying, "Is this better than the other ways?" So. Yes, I think that's a good challenge. Like people say, you never can have enough quality big guys. But now you're trying to like I struggle to answer your questions because I want the answer to come to me organically through competition. Instead of saying, well, we're going to start this guy and start this guy and start this guy. You know, you can't sit there in recruiting and say, you know, whoever gets it, and then not let it happen. So I don't even like answering your question because I want them to earn it. You know, but will you look at it schematically and say like what helps us better across the board? Sure.
Matt, Travion talked about how much Zach's confidence has grown from last year to this year.
Yep.
How have you seen that kind of intangibles on the court these last few weeks as he's come into this season?
He's really hard to deal with, Zach is. Like you have rules in terms of like your ball screen D and your post D, and like some of the things that you have to do with him go against your rules. Because if you do it that way, you know, if he gets low position, it's really hard. And then he caves people in. Like most people that size, 7'4", 290, 300 pounds, are not good rebounders because they struggle to make a sudden movement and then be able to rebound. So, but he can move, like he can make a play on the ball and then react and go make another play by trying to rebound it. Whereas if you make a sudden movement with the other guys that we've had that are that big, they can't go make the next play. They can make the first play, they just can't have multiple efforts because it's just too much cargo. And so with him, he's able to move with that much weight, and it's really impressive. He's been very good.
Now that you're on to your third or fourth iteration of having a big guy like this, are you learning a little more about how to use this?
Yeah, you learn from the other guys.
Yeah.
You learn from those things. But he's kind of his own guy in terms of his mobility. You know, he can get back in transition. His ball screen D's pretty good. If he has to switch onto somebody, like he's not out there, you know, on the perimeter and just doesn't know what he's doing. He does a good job of staying down, contesting shots, making it hard on people. He's a good player. It's kind of been amazing to watch, to be frank with you. I don't think college basketball realizes the impact he's going to have.
The ceiling is still a ways away from him.
Yeah, well, he just started playing 5 years ago.
Right.
Matt, can you just kind of break down Caleb and Trey Kaufman-Renn, where they are right now and how ready they are to fill that role early in the season?
Yeah, well, how ready they are will be answered by how they play, from what I say. Those guys will, you know, they get into practices and we run a lot of stuff. Mm-hmm. So sometimes you get bogged down because you're thinking about what you need to do instead of playing. So right as they can get to where they really know what they're doing and they can just kind of let loose and play, they're both really going to take off. But they've both had good moments in practice. And they both work hard. They put in a lot of time. They have a lot of similarities, you know, in terms of just how they are as people and how they are as players. You know, they've been really good when they've had to be together. They just don't know everything. So they have some subtle breakdowns that here, hopefully in a month, 2 months, especially going into next year, that they should be really good. I'd be shocked if those guys are not conference players at some point.
How much has Trey played on the perimeter in practice, and how comfortable is he out there so
Trey
far?
Kaufman?
Yeah.
He's fine. He can shoot the basketball. He can make individual plays. He's a good player. He can score. Best thing he can do is score. So we just try, when he gets into those situations, try to get him to be aggressive in that area when he has space and stuff. Yeah, we can't rebound his turnovers. So get those guys that can score to be aggressive and shoot, because we can always rebound their misses.
How does he guard out there?
He's good. He's good. He's working on it. See, it helps him when they're bigger. Where he's going to have more of a trouble is when you get against those guys that are really small forwards that play the 4. That's the trouble for all those guys. That's the trouble. I shouldn't say the trouble. That's the hardest thing they have to do. A lot of people don't understand. It's like, well, I can guard that guy, but can you chase him and guard him? Like, that's because the guys they've been guarding, like those guys are more rooted close to the rim. And now they're all. So I got 5 guys on my front line that all guarded centers in high school. Mason guarded centers in high school. So it's just an adjustment. They want to talk in theory about how they guard, and you really got to be able to guard actions that most of college basketball runs. You
said when you have Zach and Travion out there together, you still want to post the 4. Does that apply to Caleb too then when he's in there?
Yes, but not quite as much. Not quite as much. Caleb's a better perimeter shooter than him. Caleb is not as proficient in the low post yet.
Yeah, I was just going to ask.
Kind of like, you remember how Travion was as a freshman? You could get it down there, and it's just a comfort level. It just needs to keep getting reps.
What would be Caleb's offensive niche playing alongside this sort of size he's never played next to before? Is it stretching the floor with his?
We still would posting, because a lot of times in those doubles, when you dive, now you take on guards, and then now when you can get into a double, skip it, reverse it, and now throw it into him. Now you got him playing from behind right there. But Caleb First has really shot the ball well from the perimeter. He's been very fluid shooting the basketball. And like, the thing I really talked to him in recruiting was, so many big guys want to shoot on the perimeter, but then they stink as free throw shooters. So if you can't make them from 15 and no one's guarding you, why should you shoot them from 22 when somebody's guarding you? But yet they think that should be a real possibility. So he shot 82 and 84% his last 2 years of high school. And it's really, in my opinion, I think once you just really dial into being a great free throw shooter and you make strides, it helps with your ability to shoot jumpers too.
When you say the perimeter, you're talking about 3-point shooting?
Yes. Yeah, Caleb's really shot the ball well from 3. No, he's not shooting 20 of them a practice like Carson Edwards was. So it's like, it's a low volume deal, but he's done a really good job of kind of picking his spots. And when you have a good team and you got like good pieces, getting guys to understand about just being a little bit more patient in the half court to kind of go from average to good and good to great. And sometimes it's hard with certain guys, but as the season goes on, that's what kind of makes a team, is those guys understanding of that.
And I asked this off subject, what does it mean to you being the second longest tenured coach in the league?
Well, I'm appreciative when we struggled that they didn't pull the plug on me. That's my first thought, because we didn't go to the tournament back-to-back years, and there's a lot of coaches out there when that happens to you. You know, you got to think about what that next year looks like, and they don't always stay with the coach. So I'm appreciative that they stood by me, but just know, you know, very fortunate for the initial opportunity more than anything. But just to be able to kind of, I always ask Coach Katie, like why didn't you have a vacation spot? Like you coached 25 years at Purdue, like why don't you have a place to go and vacation and lake house or something? He just said, hell, I thought I was always going to get fired. He goes, I was just going year to year, and I thought that's kind of foolish, because you look at it like look at all the success you had. Like why? But I know that answer. Like you never feel like it's good enough. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you just don't. You go to the Sweet 16, you should have went to Elite 8. You got second in the Big Ten, you should have won it. You got third, you should have got second, whatever it is. And so, but no, it's, you know, very grateful more than anything, just because it's, I've been in the right place at the right time twice. And a lot of times in this business, guys just don't get the break. And I've gotten 2 of them, so.
Matt, I asked these guys earlier about the burden of expectations coming into a year like this, and both of them answered that they haven't really won anything yet. They come into this year being confident without being the least bit overconfident. Do you see that as a collective with this group, that they know they can do a lot of stuff?
Yeah, we try to keep them in their place and just stay with just the process of getting better. and working on things, and holding people accountable and holding each other accountable. So we've had some pretty competitive practices so far. And I think that piece, what you guys have really asked me the questions I don't have answers to, has been really healthy for our team. And they understand that. Like Eric and Travion have won a Big Ten championship. They've played in an Elite Eight game. Eric Hunter's won a state championship. So like they've had success, so they know what it looks like. But they've also had failures. Like 2 years ago, we weren't very good. We beat 5 top 25 teams, but we were 16 and 15. So they were a part of that. And then they made improvements, and they were much better last year. But we need to make another big jump to hopefully be able to contend for a Big Ten championship and do better in the NCAA tournament.
You mentioned varsity, you mentioned that Big Ten championship.